Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm really honored to be here. Thank you to my good friend and brother Bharat for inviting me this time. I think I was here with you about a year ago or more. And this is a kind of continuation on a similar theme. So I'm sure you're all quite aware that in the last decade or so, and especially increasingly in the last several years, there's been an explosion of interest and people becoming involved in the use of substances that alter consciousness, whether we call them psychedelics or entheogens or empathogens. There's movements to make them more available, more legally. There are studies being done at a good number of universities and hospital-based treatment locations in New York, California, Colorado, even what we call red states. And the explosion of use, explosion of interest, is creating a lot of opportunities and of course, a lot of problems. So I just want to first talk a little bit about my own experience, which was initially in the 60s as a kind of flower child, finding various ways to explore these things like LSD at the time particularly. And it definitely had a very, very big impact on my life. It changed the direction of my life towards spirituality and spiritual practice. And I then became a part of a group that taught a particular model, a particular path of meditation called Agni Yoga. And as most spiritual groups, especially at the time, they told us we shouldn't use any of these kinds of substances. And so I didn't. And so there was about 10 years of intensive, disciplined practice. And for various reasons, I exited that group about 1980 and was then reintroduced to the use of some of the psychedelic substances in a very different way than I'd been experiencing them earlier. That way was a very intentional, carefully guided in a very carefully arranged setting, aiming basically for spiritual growth. And that's been a big part of what I have experienced with them since that time. Also, as a psychotherapist, which I used to practice in California, now I'm in New York. And as a psychotherapist, I'm aware of some of the people that I work with wanting to or already going to various guides and group settings where they experience sometimes very strong psychedelic experiences. And so I've become very interested in what is two stages of what we could call a journey process that surround the actual experience of an altered state with a substance. So the first stage is preparation. And what that means is, well, in fact, I just recently published, self-published a book on Amazon called Preparation for a Sacred Psychedelic Journey. It's just a little book, as you can see, and but it's sort of a manual, a helpful guide, because I've seen so many people jump into these things without really seriously considering what they're getting into and what the potentials are for it. So I can talk a little bit more about what I'm suggesting and what I think a lot of people have found about preparation and how important it is. At the other end is integration. So after the journey experience, after all, the journey experience could be, well, with some substances, maybe an hour, and with some it's 4, 5, 6 hours, but that's it. And so there's the before and there's the after. And the after, what we call integration, means that you're focusing on what did I learn? And what is that experience in so far as it relates to my life, not just the experience during that time, but how can I maybe benefit from what I learned to allow that experience to then be part of how I live. So there's various things that people can do that can make that more of a reality, make that part of their life experience. So one of the primary important things about a psychedelic journey is safety. And people need to know something about the substance that they're using, that it's procured from a source that is reliable or trustworthy. They need to know something often about what that substance may induce or activate in them, because different substances do work differently. We have right now a very widespread use of ketamine. And that's, of course, as some of you probably know, ketamine is a drug that's used recreationally a lot in the rave scene, and it can be addictive. It's one of the only psychedelics that I think can really be addictive. But ketamine is being used in therapeutic settings, again, with a very wide range of care about the inner workings of what it means to be in an altered state and how to make use of it. So what I mean by that is most that I've become aware of the ketamine clinics that are there to help people with depression or chronic pain, or those are the two main things that they seem to promote, are running them like this. A person comes in, they sit in a comfortable chair, and they're given either an IM injection or an IV infusion of ketamine that lasts for maybe up to an hour. The person who administers that usually leaves the room and then comes back and unplugs, and that's it, go home. So, and then there are those, fewer, who are literally doing therapeutic work prior to the experience, leading up to it, sometimes for periods of time, and then during the session are right there and communicating in whatever way is possible with that person, and then afterwards helping guide what begins an integration process. So another form of use with the psychedelic substances that last like maybe 5 or 6 hours, like MDMA or 2CB or psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, and so forth, have much longer periods of time. And people who do these sessions apparently one-to-one, usually have the person lie down, wear eye shades, have headphones with music playing, and again, very wide spectrum of how the guide or therapist, if it's you want to call it a therapist, is relating to the person during the experience. From a very hands-off, just give the person the medicine and then let them go through whatever they go through, just witnessing, kind of holding this space, making sure the person feels safe, to a therapeutic interaction where the person talks and the guide responds, and maybe even guides meditations. And my particular interest in the potentials for the emergence of psychedelics back into the world is that they can amplify spiritual practice. That's my particular interest, because I've found that has worked for me. As I said, I was in a group and learning a very deep form of meditative practice for about 10 or 11 years in the 70s. And when I got to experience first MDMA and employed those same practices, which I had been experiencing very powerfully and which I had even been teaching. I'd become like a teacher in this particular meditation practice. I said, now I'm experiencing it for the first time. So the vivifying, the amplifying and making real of whatever experience we're having is a great potential for really making more powerful the experiences we have from spiritual practice. So again, guidance during a journey can involve that sometimes if the guide is, for instance, well practiced in meditation and maybe teaches meditation. They can encourage that focus of attention. And of course, one does that with the person's permission and preparation, so that one practices the meditation prior. So the goal really of meditation, of a journey, of a psychedelic entheogenic journey. Maybe I should clarify a little bit these words. If you're not familiar with them, you're all familiar with the word psychedelic, but in many ways it's a very vague term, really. What does it actually mean, and what is the experience like? The word entheogen, which translates literally into drawing forth the divine from within, really names that quality of the potential of some of these psychedelic experiences to bring about a spiritual awakening, and to draw forth that aspect of the individual, which is presence, which is the divine, which is the higher self or Buddha nature. And so that's where the word entheogen has come in. And the word psychedelic, which has so much baggage, really, and to a lot of people's minds because of abuse and it being essentially considered recreational, people wanting just to get high and avoid practice or discipline. So entheogen is a good word, really. And then the other substances are, some of them, like MDMA, is called an empathogen because, again, it generates that quality that is already there in everyone, but is often blocked off, which is empathy, starting with empathy for oneself. So one sometimes experiences feelings that they've been holding about another person, about their parents, about things that happened when they were younger, and they can experience it without the kind of aversion and pushing away. You know, we talk a lot about in mindfulness that we're cultivating an attitude of being able to discern and see and be aware without either pushing away or pulling towards us, right? And the empathogens tend to amplify that quality in people. Again, particularly if a person is conscious of that possibility and seeking that. So this brings me back to the question of preparation in the sense of set and setting. So way back in the early days of the research with psychedelics, before they were even illegal, the Harvard group, which was Timothy Leary and Dick Alpert, who became Ram Dass, and Ralph Metzner, who was my primary teacher and guide in learning about these things, developed the concept of set and setting. And it's a very useful way of framing really any experience, because what it's really saying is that what we experience is really a mixture or an interaction of what's inside us. That's the set. In other words, our hopes, our fears, our goals, our intentions, and includes things that we're not aware of, unconscious, subconscious material. That's the set, all of what's inside us. And then whatever's outside of us, the immediate environment and even the cultural environment and the planetary environment is the setting. But particularly, we would focus on the immediate environment. So where are we in what kind of a room, what kind of decor, are we in nature, who's there? So that interaction is largely what determines our experience at any time. And when we're on having taken one of these, what I call sacred medicines, it amplifies that chemistry, that interaction between what's inside and what's outside, such that it's very, very much more powerful. We're really experiencing what we're experiencing is another way of kind of saying it. We're aware more vividly of what the flow of phenomena is that's passing through our consciousness. So preparing for a journey, one wants to be as conscious as possible of their set. So the preparation would involve introspection, like through journal writing, through maybe being in therapy, through asking oneself really deep questions. What is it that still feels unhealed in me, unfinished? Looking really back at when I encourage people to consider, they tell me they're preparing for a journey, and I'm helping them in some ways to prepare because they're in therapy with me. I encourage them to go back and write their autobiography, not so much as a memoir, but as a kind of list. What were the significant events of your life, starting with your birth? Because sometimes in a psychedelic experience, people can revisit in a very vivid way pre-memory experiences, going way, way back to where people experience what's called the perinatal time, immediately after birth, birth itself. They can experience being in the womb and what imprints came from their mother, loving energy or perhaps anxiety. And so kind of the study or exploration of what's possible to experience can be part of the preparation. It isn't like it's programming a person to experience something. It's like opening to the possibility that, oh, maybe I could experience this. And maybe some of that way back there is some of the roots of the things that I struggle with today. Even though more traditional psychology pretty much focuses on just our lives as far back as we can remember, childhood, really. And whereas in these kinds of journeys, one can experience transpersonal influences that are affecting us and have affected us, intergenerational trauma, or not just trauma, but intergenerational transmissions of wisdom teachings that came from, that have been maybe lost in the last couple of generations. So that's another thing, to be open to the possibilities of what one can experience is good preparation. I don't want to take all of the time just talking, so how much time is there left in what I'm given to share?
Another 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe I'll open it right now. I could talk more, but I'll open it right now because I would be really happy to hear thoughts, questions from folks, concerns about this as you've been becoming aware or maybe participating in some of this, what they call renaissance of psychedelic activity. Anything being
Clint
triggered?
has his hand up.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Trace. Clint, you got it on your mute. You're still muted. Oh, there you go. Nope. No, you're muted again. Now you're unmuted.
Okay, hopefully this one stays. I've read several of Stanislav Grof's books about work that seems very similar to what you're talking about.
A lot of it comes from him.
Okay, only I understand that because of legalities of using psychedelics, that he's doing a holotropic breath work as a substitute. But I wondered if one wanted to pursue a therapy, the type that you're discussing, with the problem that some of these substances are still considered illegal, how can one pursue that?
How can one have these work with these kinds of things given that it's illegal?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine. Okay, sorry. Go on.
No, it's of course a significant question, an important question. There are two realms in a way where people can experience these things. One is the very legal realm, where what we call the above ground, where university hospitals and in many areas now have various programs where they're researching and providing people with the opportunity to work, but it's essentially clinical. That is, the person has to have some particular issue, an addiction, depression, they've been diagnosed at the end of life, and they have anxiety about that. And so they can, apply to one of these programs, and if there's an opening, they can get in. And of course, it's free, and they provide usually a lot of therapy before, during, and after. But it's very clinical. Now, then there's what's called the underground, which has been in existence all throughout the periods of prohibition and even currently, only there's been in recent times an explosion of the underground because of the popularization of psychedelics. And so there's a very wide range, it appears, of experience that people who purport to guide sessions and facilitate groups have. But it's essentially word of mouth. So in other words, it's likely that if you know people in San Francisco, you know somebody who knows somebody who know, who's doing this kind of work or participating in this kind of work at this point. Hope that helps. If that's
Yeah,
what you're
I
looking
know, I know the CIIS, the California Institute of Clinical Studies, deals a lot with therapy and psychedelics, but
Well, that's the thing. The CIIS and a number of universities, even Harvard, has a program training people to be psychedelic guides, but it's no experience. It's all academic. It's all, book learning essentially, or lectures. And that's not to say that the people that are in the programs probably, likely, have experiences in this underground world. But the programs don't have it. They don't include it and they don't sanction it.
right. Well, because of the legalities, I can understand that.
Totally. Yeah, it's still illegal, even in California.
So stupid.
It is.
Thank
It's
you.
destructive. Yeah, thank you. Greg.
I thank you very much for your talk. Could you talk a little more about, I know you talked about consciousness as one byproduct of these experiences. And I'm sure if it's part of your preparation, maybe read about if there are things, how these substances, how they affect people's consciousness around their Buddhist practice, that kind of thing. But could you talk a little bit about, relationships between this kind of experience and Buddhist, either meditation or Buddhist teachings, please?
Well, yeah, absolutely. That, as I said, that is my primary interest, not necessarily specifically Buddhist, but any spiritual practice that a person has, there is a potential for these experiences to really deepen the practice. You probably know that the first wave of Buddhist teachers, primarily, from what I understand from their reports, initially were motivated to even explore India and Southeast Asia and these places and learn meditation because of their psychedelic experiences. And of course, the book Zigzag Zen talks a lot about and has a variety of perspectives from Buddhist teachers on the use of psychedelics. And that was written quite a while ago. Now, my understanding is that some Buddhist circles are allowing for and incorporating the use of psychedelics in sits, in sessions. Does anybody know if that's true? I have heard that. But, the essence, as I understand it, of Buddhism, which is in some ways the essence of all religion, all spiritual practice, is to get in touch with and experience and embody Buddha nature. That's something that definitely psychedelic experience can amplify. Yeah.
Thank you. A quick question. Do you do Zoom sessions, or is it only helpful for the guide to be in person?
Oh, I'm not saying I'm a guide. I'm an explorer myself, and like I said, I prepare and help people through it. But I've heard of people doing Zoom guidance. It doesn't resonate to me that that's a great idea.
Okay.
If is a last resort, if there's no other possibility, and there's a real good rapport, like with the guide therapist, that would work with them before. And
Thanks.
experiences that I've participated in, where I've been a participant in a group or have had a guide work with me individually, is a very significant connection. That's live, and that's the energy presence, and sometimes the touch of a person on the heart or holding a hand or on the head can be really critical. And if that's not available, it's difficult. People sometimes go through cathartic experiences, opening up to places that have been locked away for a long period of time. Even opening up to a deep spiritual experience can be very, very emotionally moving, and the warmth of a person very close, not just on a computer screen, is really important. A couple of people. You want to pick whoever's next? I didn't see who was first.
Hey, Tom Bruin has hand up next.
Oh, hey, Alan, thank you so much. Always love hearing from you on this topic. Question, I'm wondering, do you categorize cannabis as something that can also be used for these types of spiritual insights, when used properly rather than just for fun and recreation?
Definitely. Yes, definitely. In fact, there's a book that I just became aware of. It was written by someone who's been doing just that, been doing what he calls psychedelic cannabis journeys for well over 10 years. I forget how long, but and he that's the name of his book, Psychedelic Cannabis. And he uses that and uses the same kind of protocol that people have learned to use with psilocybin and ayahuasca and other things, of lying down, eyes closed or shades, music, preparation, carefully set intentions, and so forth. And he says that the experiences are just as profound as when they use stronger psychedelics, and it's legal. Well, he's in Colorado, and it's legal in more than half of America now lives in a place where cannabis is legal.
Right.
What I've also found is that small doses of cannabis, small edibles like 2.5 milligrams, or a small amount of the smoke for people who like to smoke, can amplify the meditative practice that one learns to do or deepens doing in the entheogenic journey, and can bring it back. Small amount.
Right. And if you have time, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the use of microdosing, especially during the integration phase, but that might be a whole nother topic.
Yeah, it is another topic. And it's, to be honest, it's not one that I've become yet that familiar with. Yeah. Microdosing. Yeah. It's definitely a big phenomenon, and been watching to see where that leads. Samuel.
Yes, I'm well. Yeah, I just want to share a little bit about a year or so before pre-pandemic. I participated in a day-long kind of ceremony of with the use of psilocybin.
Uh-huh.
And the facility, we were a small group of like 5 or 6 people. The person that facilitated it was trained in the Oaxacan tradition.
Uh-huh.
So we started with an initial ceremony, and then everybody laid out on the floor with blindfolds, and we went through it for, of course, several hours, and he had a soundtrack to it, which was quite profound in terms of taking us through the journey.
Yeah.
And so it was quite a profound experience. And then afterwards we had a couple hours to journal write or integrate it, and then we shared a potluck at the end. But it was a very meaningful experience, and parts of it were quite difficult, but in the end it was like, it was really
Yeah.
came to sort of a peaceful ending and kind of soundtracks up.
It's not a picnic. It's work.
Oh.
It's inner work. It's deep. Would you say, given some of the questions, would you say that it helped your Buddhist practice?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually a diamond approach person, but yeah, the meditation, the spiritual journey, I mean, it's totally connected and profound. And yeah, I mean, there were certain experiences that happened where I found, you know, I would like be resisting and felt like my egoic stuff, and then I'd release it and it would, like, you know, shift to another space. It was it's quite
right. You really get viscerally and emotionally the teachings that sometimes are largely up here.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
oh, that's what they mean by let it be.
Yeah, I mean, it's the heart.
That's what it means. It means really let it all be, all of it, everything, every little thing, every little piece of suffering and pain and all the rest. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, you know, I'm back to in my egoic reality having.
Well, that's where the integration comes in, right? We all come back, definitely come back to who you were. And
yeah, but what I want to say is, but what came through is, you know, what is the teaching all the time in spiritual work is that it's a loving reality, you know.
Yeah, it's wonderful when that comes through. When people can get through all of that, the layers and layers of armor and stuff, and they'll inevitably get to that place where what we're told is true, that the essence of it all is love, and that we're here to be compassionate and kind beings and help.
Yeah, so thank you for
it's the raw truth.
your presence today. Thanks.
Yeah. John, you next?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you so much, Alan. I don't know if you're familiar with Jung. Jung had a correspondence with, I think, a monk, and or at least a Catholic, some kind of Catholic order person, and that person asked Jung about the use of psychedelic substances, and Jung's reply was, "There's so much in the unconscious that I'm already kind of processing and integrating that to open that door up for me at this point would be kind of premature." And to me, it kind of, I guess my question is about bypass and that edge between amplification and actually bypassing some kind of work that has to happen in another modality, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the first thing about Jung, yes, Jung rejected the opportunity to try psychedelics, and he said something along those lines that you said, that he's already got enough access to the unconscious material and the imagery and so forth. But again, he never tried it. He's a genius and he contributed so much anyway. I once gave a talk to the Jung Institute in Massachusetts about Jung and psychedelics. But so much of what Jung said and taught, many of us didn't understand until we took a psychedelic. So he may have had that kind of access naturally. I don't in any way claim or think that it's only through psychedelics that people can have access to both deep psychological phenomena and spiritual phenomena. Many great spiritual teachers never took a psychedelic, and they've attained what they've attained. So it's useful for some people. It's not necessarily useful for everybody. The idea of spiritual bypass, I tend to think that psychedelics in properly prepared and in the right setting tend to reduce spiritual bypass, because it, like the previous person who spoke, I forgot your name, but you get down into some really difficult places. Sometimes you feel viscerally, physically, and somatically the kinds of emotional patterns that have rigidified in oneself. You literally feel that, and you can find yourself in a kind of struggle with your shadow, or in a very literal sort of way, a very visual sort of way. And so again, it's quite possible, and I have no doubt that people who use them more recreationally and without the right kind of guidance, it does produce, it can amplify the spiritual bypass phenomenon. That's a danger. That's one of the dangers. But again, that's why it's so important that people properly, well, I think of as properly, but that there is a kind of sacred container and an intention to get to truth, not to just escape into some kind of happy place. Dave, do you want to say something?
Yeah.
Mhm.
The word holotropic has been mentioned. I mean, I've had a couple experiences that I know one was specifically in a context of holotropic breathing. It was a large group of people, involved music, Mandel at the end of it. But then I've also had an experience which I think was a bona fide prenatal experience. Solely on my own. It wasn't planned, and it was just really just a matter of deep breathing. Thoughts about having the kinds of experiences that drugs, as external substances, that is a source, a way to get those experiences. But what about having those experiences with just breathing?
Sorry, what was the last part you said? What about?
So how do you have thoughts about having those same kinds of experiences, but via breathing, breath work?
Yeah. My thoughts are that one can do that. One can have those experiences. I was part of the Vision Quest work for about 10 years while I lived in California, and we would take groups, we would prepare, have meetings to prepare, set intentions. We'd go out into the desert wilderness, and people would then go off and find a place to be alone for 4 days, fasting with just water. And that immersion in nature with no input from telephones or anything like that, and then come back and share and integrate the experience, provided a kind of slow cook altered state that was very, very profound and very, very helpful. And certainly the breath work that Stan Groff got into when LSD became illegal was, provided those kinds of experiences for many people. Deep meditation practice can certainly bring about those kinds of experiences. I do know that Stan never gave up the notion that psychedelics can and do provide experiences that sometimes it's very difficult to get to in these other modalities. Just yeah.
Thank you, Alan. We have to wrap up.
Maybe there's one other thing, because Bharat sent me a message that maybe there would be some concern about, would people of the boomer generation want to be doing something like this? And I would say, of course, not necessarily, But one opportunity that often comes from the experience with a sacred journey of this kind is acceptance of where we are on the journey of life. Early, middle, late in life, there's like an acceptance of the aging process, even the dying process, that can be very, very, very profound. And I think that's going to be a use to which these substances will contribute in our culture, because the way we deal with death, the way we deal with aging and illness is very pathological as a culture. So I think it's one of the areas that these things can make a great contribution in.